Here's my question for you.
Mm-hmm.
This is not making it in the show.
Oh, yeah. Please don't put the drawing and quartering in the show. But, wow, sorry.
Yeah, we should probably get to something we can keep in the show.
Hey, we can keep some of that. Not all of it. Probably not a lot of it.
Welcome to My Hill to Die On, episode 20.
Everyone has things that they're passionate about.
Things we want our friends to try and experience.
So we've convinced each other to try different things.
And we talk about these experiences to see if we can get just one more person
to join us on our hill to die on.
I feel so far removed from the problem being out here. I feel like because we're not meeting in school and because I'm not in America.
For me, the reason why I am especially aware of it is because I teach a politics class. And so much is happening right now in the world that I feel like it's important for my students to know about it. It's important for my students to learn about it, not only because it is a representation of the process of having your voice heard, but also why it's such a big issue. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know if you've seen the Trevor Noah bit on this.
No, I haven't. I kind of wanted to, actually. I haven't gotten a chance to see that.
He explains it very well and very clearly, but one of the things that he says is that, and it actually comes back to something that I taught my students early in the year, all societies have a social contract. The citizens are expected to do certain things. The country is expected to do certain things. The citizens give their loyalty to the country gives its protection to the citizens. And in this case, we have a large community of citizens who have been holding up their end of the bargain, and the country hasn't been doing their side. The contract between the two groups, the citizens, in this case, the African American citizens of America, and the country of America, the citizens have been holding up their end of the bargain. They've been loyal to the country, they've been following the rules, and the country has been oppressing them. They have been keeping them from having the same rights as their other citizens. And when it comes to that, it's the fact that we need to recognize that that is an issue that needs to be addressed because it is a degradation of their rights as a human being. Mm-hmm. We've talked about before how everybody is deserving of the same respect as they are part of a human being. And this is a example of that very thing not being what is being exploited, the fact that they are not being treated as an equal human being. And I have been talking about this in my class a lot, but not just on the global scale, but also on a local scale, about how we can address instances of racism in our own community, because it has come up in the local community before. Mm-mm. Because of my faith, because of what I believe that all humans are deserving of the same respect. Mm-hmm. The fact that how I understand my faith is that God is a God of justice. God calls us to care for the voiceless, the weak, the widow, the orphan, and the sojourner in our land is what is constantly referred to. Those are the people who at the time had no power, no voice. But also, Christ used the Good Samaritan as an example, and that is, in effect, a call against racism as well, because in that time, Samaritans were looked down upon. They weren't equal citizens. They were the other. And yet, this was the person to look up to. This was the person who was doing the right thing. So all these things point to me to say, yeah, racism is a problem that has existed for centuries, millennia, and for heaven to break into this moment, it needs to be stopped. Mm-hmm. There needs to be justice. There needs to be right. And it's not happening in America. And that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, my daughter was watching, for her Bible class, was watching the story of the Good Samaritan retold. It was sent to her by her teacher, but it is something I've seen around. It's stories they've watched on YouTube before. The teacher has sent links. And in that retelling, they had the victim of the Good Samaritan, the victim Jew.
Mm-hmm.
They had that person as a young boy in the beginning of the story. They started the story way back there. And that boy was walking around with his father in Jerusalem, and the boy said, "Oh, look over there, look who's that." And the father said, "Oh, that's a Samaritan. We don't associate with them." And then the story moved on from there. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, that's not in the Bible. I reacted badly to that because I was like, oh, that's not in the Bible. And Jesus didn't say that in the story. But it is setting up context for us in the current times.
Plus, it gives that context because most people go, oh, Samaritan. Okay, great.
Whatever, yeah.
Yeah, but it is the fact that it was viewed as we don't associate with those people.
Yeah.
That's how it was viewed at that time.
Yeah, and it was very heavy-handed, that comment. Like, it was more than what I'm saying too. Like, there was looks of disgust and things like that in the story. And I'm like, wow, this is heavy. Looking back on it now, I feel like that's appropriate. But at the time, I was like, whoa, this is harsh, very harsh. And I was surprised it was there. But now, yeah. It took me till the evening to realize more about why that was there. But when I was seeing it, I was like, whoa, that's too much. But that evening, I was like, whoa, okay, I understand now why they're putting that in there.
Yeah, so all I would say is this whole thing that's happening in America right now, I'm saddened that it has had to take so many deaths for something to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope and I pray that justice can become a reality for all. I think that is something that we can all hope for. I will say certain things that are interesting. For example, the NAACP has some demands that they've put out about this whole issue. And the demands are they are things that I feel like everybody should be able to agree with. They are pushing for federal legislation to ban the use of knee holds and choke holds as an acceptable practice. The use of force continuum for any police department in the country must ensure that there are at least 6 levels of steps with clear rules of escalation. Basically, that they take proper escalation steps. Each state's Open Records Act must ensure officer misconduct information and disciplinary histories are not shielded from the public. So the public should be able to see.
Wow, that's serious. When people make mistakes. That one's a little rough.
See, my feeling is, for example, the officer in question had 18 misconducts before this incident.
Yeah, okay, that's understandable.
So, I mean, it's the fact that right now so many police officers can basically be hidden behind a wall where the public don't know if they've had issues in the past.
Yeah, I guess why I react is people make mistakes. People make mistakes all the time. Making 18 of them probably should have warranted suspicion.
All this is saying is that the officer misconduct can be viewed. It is not shielded from the public. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are like open to browse. It does.
Yeah. Are they live on the website? Yeah.
At least this is how I'm reading it, is that they are not shielded. If it is requested,
they'll be provided.
They'll provide it.
Okay.
I don't know if they're wanting it open on a website. And I think that'd be at least for discussion. But for how I read this, I feel like, especially because there are many times where the reason why there's so much anger around this is because so many times police officers have killed unarmed black men and nothing's happened to them.
And that I understand. Definitely. Very clear to me.
Yeah. I get that having one's like past misconduct and disciplinary histories.
Oh, yeah, because there are a lot of instances where somebody's simple mistake can go back to haunt them, in America especially. Some past mistakes are more deserving of haunting than others, but it is a case often in America where past mistakes haunt you for the rest of your life, and there's no way around that. And sometimes it's deserved and sometimes it isn't, but...
Yeah. At least where I stand on that one is I think that especially because of how it's been done in the past, because so many police officers have gotten away with so much. And I'm not saying that all police officers are bad. No, they're great police officers. This is to root out the bad ones. That's what this is all about.
Part of it, too, is the level of availability. I think you're right. Like, hey, you know what? If your family was harassed by a police officer and you go to your lawyer and say, this is the police officer that harassed me, I don't see why the lawyer couldn't ask for the records. That sounds like a decent way of approaching it.
Yeah, I'm just not sure what level of transparency they're looking for, but I think that transparency isn't necessarily a bad thing there.
No.
Anyway, this is the next one. Recertification credentials may be denied to police officers if determined that their use of deadly force was unwarranted by federal guidelines. Basically, if they've used deadly force and it was unwarranted, they can be denied being a police officer in the future. That seems reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Implementation of citizens' review boards in municipalities to hold police departments accountable and build public confidence.
Yeah, so this is like a more stronger internal affairs department, basically. Potentially more public too, right?
Well, it's a public internal affairs, basically. It is the citizens who are able to review it.
That actually sounds interesting to me. Because one of the problems I was realizing in thinking about this a little bit was, internal affairs departments always get a bad rap, on TV especially. I don't know if it's that way in real life, but definitely on TV they always get a bad rep. And I was like, how would you even go about changing that? But making it public would be a very interesting way of changing that, I think.
Well, it means that the police officers would lose the impunity of not being able to be held accountable to the people that they're supposed to be serving. That the people they're serving can say, no, let's look at these accounts, let's look at these things, and they can have input on that review process.
How did it start too in that phrase? What was the instigator to go to a panel?
Oh, it is implementation of citizen review boards in municipalities to hold police departments accountable and to build public confidence.
So it doesn't say how they would come in front of the board.
No, and it just says that basically there is a review board in communities, but I do think that second part, build public confidence, is the big part.
Yeah. To me, I look at it like trials have juries of their peers, right? You are being judged by the people you're supposed to be anyway.
Yeah.
Judged by the people in your community, whether you're guilty or not. And that's to get the bad guys put away. And this is a kind of almost a similar system, not necessarily with as dire consequences, perhaps, or as dire crimes, perhaps, but... Mm-hmm.
Also, if there are things that go wrong in a school,
mm-hmm.
usually it's the parents and the board who get involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing, is the people who are being served by these people who have a voice in this situation. And I think that's the key right there. It gives a voice to those who currently have no voice in this situation. And so I actually think that what they are asking for in this federal legislation, so they're asking for this to be federal legislation.
That would actually be quite interesting.
Yeah. So I think what they're asking for is very reasonable, and I think that I'm actually in full support of it. But that's where I stand on that, because I think that it is a step to make that justice equal.
So we just had grad.
Yeah. We just finished graduation. I will say, I definitely forgot how much prep work goes into grad, because I always forget how much it is until it's here.
Well, for us, it was for the tech department anyway, it was probably about the same amount of prep and tear down and stuff. I appreciated the smaller graduation. So for our graduation this year, we had only our graduates show up, and then we live streamed the event like we always do. But of course, this time the parents were watching on the live stream, other students were watching on the live stream. Everybody who would, all the, multiple hundreds of people that would come normally would watch it on live stream instead.
Yeah, we had about, around 4 or 5 times as many people watching the live stream this year.
Mm-hmm. And, people come in families, so even one live stream viewer probably accounted for at least 2 people, on average probably, right? Maybe a little less than 2.
Yeah.
But I appreciated that because it was only the graduates. There was no reception afterward. Actually, I kind of liked that. I think you made the comment that we usually have the juniors help us and we got to get out in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I felt like we packed pretty quickly,
mm-hmm.
but it was nice not to have the pressure of the reception bearing down on us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought it went very well.
Oh yeah, I felt like it went very well. I mean, there were a few minor hiccups, but there always are.
Mm-hmm.
With any event you have, there's always going to be something small and minor.
Actually, I went through and I did the edit today.
Mm-hmm.
And because your camera recorded and the front camera's recorded this year, it was the first time we'd done that, it was very easy to fix all the mistakes, all the small mistakes, granted small mistakes, but it was very easy to fix all the small mistakes in the edit. I really liked that. Like, for instance, because I have the luxury of foresight with an edit, I know when the speaker is about to talk. So in the live stream, the switching operator didn't switch back to the podium when the podium speaker started speaking again. He would hear the podium speaker speak and then switch back to the podium. But because I had the foresight of, oh, look, that's when they start talking, and because we had recorded that camera, the podium camera, I just mixed in the podium speaker, and then when the live stream switched to the podium speaker, then I would just switch back to the live stream's mix. So there'd be like 2 or 3 seconds of podium speaker that I would stick in. Then the stream recording would catch up to being podium in the front, and then I'd cut back to that, and you can't even tell because I lined up the shots frame to frame. So like, oh, there was a cut there, but you can't even see it because it's the same camera in the same frame. So, I didn't do that. Final Cut did that for me. But lining everything up like that was so nice. So yeah, that was very easy to do the edit.
By the way, how did the jump go? Because there was that one student
that worked
who
out
decided
real well.
to jump.
Yep, you got the whole thing in frame.
Because I was trying to keep with him. I was not anticipating that and trying to keep with him.
Yep. You got the whole thing in frame. It worked out very well. Yeah, I think this year was one of our best years, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it went very smoothly. I was very happy with how everything went.
And we still have a week and a half of school to go.
I know. I still have my grading to finish. I told myself I was doing that today.
Did you do it today?
I did not do it today. I slept in and then played some video games. And then a neighbor of mine came over and said, hey, do you want to play this game co-op? And I said, yeah. And that was pretty much my day. So a lot of gaming and a lot of like lounging around the house. So yeah, no, I did not get that grading done today. So maybe tomorrow?
You got to unplug your systems before you go to bed then. All right, so what have you been playing, Ryan?
Oh, well, lately, so I finished a bunch of the shorter games I said last week. I have moved back into doing another long game, and I have also been playing a couple of co-op things with some friends and neighbors. So I'm not going to talk about the co-op games right now because that'll save something for conversation for a later week. Because I am playing with other people, I anticipate those taking longer. But right now, what I am playing for my personal game is Persona 5 Royal.
Haven't heard of that one.
So Persona 5 came out... Did the original one come out 2 years ago now? Yes, all right. So Persona 5 originally released in 2017. So that's when the first game came out. And I played that game, and I'm a big fan of that game. It's a great game. Persona 5 Royal is a new version of the game, basically. What they did was they took the Persona 5 game, and then they added more to it. And this is what Royal is. Because the storyline is actually based around a student, they actually added it in a semester.
Is it like DLC, or is it more like a rewrite?
It is a rewrite because they also added some new characters in. They also added some new monsters in. They added a whole bunch of new things. Basically, it is changed enough to the extent where I would say, if you were to play Persona 5, just skip over the original one right now because the Persona 5 Royal has everything that the original one has and more. Royal is basically the full complete edition with all this extra stuff. It is a very interesting game. The Persona series is a game that deals a lot with psychology, it deals a lot with philosophy, but it is also a social simulation game and an RPG all mixed together.
Wait, it's a Sims type game?
No.
Or stories?
It is an RPG. It is a role-playing game. At its core, it's an RPG, but it also has social simulation stuff where, for example, you are constantly building relationships with people. So Basically, in all of these games, there are almost two worlds. There's the world where you do your adventuring, where you're going and fighting against monsters and doing all these stuff. And then you have the world that is essentially our world, where you're going to school, you're making friends, you're buying things, you're working a part-time job, all of that sort of stuff. And so it just progresses that way. So each day you get to choose what you are doing in that day. So I might go and hang out with a friend, or I might go and work my part-time job. And you're doing all these things that will hopefully benefit you when you go in and fight the monsters to save the world. It's a very interesting story. This one specifically is about a kid in Japan. And the story opens with him having been charged with assault because he had tried to step in and stop this guy who was basically trying to force a woman into a car with him, and she was not wanting that. And when he tried to step in, the guy fell and hurt himself. It ended up being that the kid got accused of assault and kicked out of his school and sent to live in Tokyo, where he's not normally from. So all this has happened, and it sets up this entire game where the main characters are basically fighting against corruption, but doing so through basically the guise of being phantom thieves and stealing what are essentially corrupted desires within the hearts of the enemies. So it is very interesting. And what's also amazing is, for example, one of the places that you go on a regular basis is Shibuya.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And it looks just like Shibuya.
Wow.
For example, there is the tram car that is always like to the side of the stairs going down into the subway.
Mm-hmm.
You know the tram car I'm talking about.
I think so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's there. The one that's basically directly across from is it the Hachiko?
Hachiko entrance?
Yeah. So that's all there. They've taken some great effort to basically model the city to look very similar to what it actually is. Not like perfect for perfect. Like, there are clearly stores that aren't there, but it's a very good representation of it.
And it's in the anime style?
It is an anime style art, but also it's a very stylish game. It deals with some really heavy and dark issues as well. As an example, one of the first enemies that you fight, because what you're doing is you're fighting against people who are corrupted and who are exploiting people and treating people poorly, and it's all because their desires have been twisted in some way. Well, one of the first ones you fight against is basically the school teacher who is basically abusing his students both physically and sexually. So, like I said, you deal with some really heavy issues, because that is the first guy you are fighting against, which actually is to the point where one of the students tries to commit suicide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Like I said, it is a game that deals with very heavy issues. I really think that these games are fantastic, well-developed storyline. Some of the things that they are dealing with are a little out there, but, it is just a great game. Because it deals with some heavier issues, it is one of those things that, like, I would definitely keep in mind who I recommend it to.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because, like, it's a great game, but I wouldn't suggest to really young kids to play it, simply because they might not understand all of the nuance. But also, because they treat some of those issues so well, I would say that it is also another side of things where I would say maybe if they're mature enough. So, yeah, I anticipate Persona taking me some time, because
It's a 100-ish hour game, or?
it's about 100 hours if I'm taking my time and going slowly. But as I've already beaten the original Persona 5, the first basically 2/3 of the game I've already played through. And so I might go a little bit quicker through that, but I can't say for certain if I will. So it might be somewhere between 60 to 100 hours, or it might be less. I'm anticipating that this will probably take me more than the 2 weeks till our next episode, is what it's coming down to.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives me some other things to talk about for next week. All right, so our picks then.
Mm-hmm. We decided today that because the main media has somebody arriving on a plane, we would pick two of our favorite flight memories. Because Ryan's favorite thing is flying. So, obviously we have to do this.
Yes, I'm laughing because you said favorite flight memories. I have no favorites. I have my least hated. So let's start with one of my least hated.
Yes.
So back early in college, I went on a mission trip to Spain. So I spent the summer in Spain going to various Salvation Armies, helping them out in whatever way they asked us to. So the thing that I remember the most, however, about our flight back from Spain was they had apparently overbooked the flight.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so they bumped me and my entire team to international business class.
Really?
Yes. Now, the sad thing was, this was only from the flight from Spain to Britain, to Heathrow.
Mm-hmm.
Because from Heathrow back, we had to fly our normal economy tickets.
Mm-hmm.
But that flight from, I believe it was from Madrid to Heathrow. Yeah, I'm not really sure. It's been a number of years. But from Spain to Heathrow, we rode in international business class, which was one of the most comfortable flights I've ever been on, which is saying a lot because I am usually in a general state of discomfort whenever I am on a plane. I've mentioned this loosely in a couple of moments on this flight, not this flight, on this show.
Wait a minute, this show is as bad as a flight to you?
No. This is not anywhere near as bad as a flight to me. I find this show actually enjoyable. I find flights about as enjoyable as getting my teeth dug out with a spoon.
Yeah, less so enjoyable.
So the entire time I'm basically riding this flight, the flight crew, every time they passed, would ask if I wanted another orange juice or another whatever to drink. And since it was early in the morning, I kept getting orange juice. I had probably about 6 orange juices before we landed.
You better make sure you go to the bathroom when you lay over.
Yeah, I went to the bathroom before we went on our final flight. But it was just so relaxing. The chairs were wonderfully comfortable. I was actually not even worried about the flight because I was just so relaxed and so comfortable.
How many on your team?
There were 7 of us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was great. I was probably also very happy to be out of the heat. Because, yeah, it was hot.
In Spain?
In Spain. Because the rain in Spain didn't stay mostly on the plane.
I was going to say the rain in Spain wasn't in the planes, huh?
No, not really.
Well, I think my first one is pretty similar to yours then, actually, a little bit. Yeah, when I first came to Japan here, I went back for summer and Christmas. So I had built up enough miles in Northwest to be a silver member, which you only needed to go back and forth twice to become a silver member at the time. I don't know what the rules still are. Might be similar still, but... So I had built up the silver status 1 year, and I realized that it was only going to be that year because the next year I wasn't going to go back twice. So I was like, well, whatever. It was a nice perk, and it did gain me 1 free bump to business and domestic, but again, a business class and a domestic flight wasn't... I think I flew from New Jersey to Detroit or something like that in domestic, and it didn't wow at all. But that year when we were coming back from Guam, there is a school in our league that's a girls' school, and at the time I wasn't the head coach of cross country, so I had gone to Guam. I think under my own money too, because the assistant coach doesn't always get to go. Because I was a boy, the same gender as the other coach, I couldn't be the girl chaperone, so I think I went under my own money. But I wanted to see the team, so I flew out, and on the return trip, I was flying back, and one of the girls' schools was returning at the same time as well. So I asked the lady at the counter, I said, hey, these are some of my friends, can I check them in the premier lane that I was lined up in? Because, it's one of the perks, at least I get to line up in the different line. So they said, sure, fine, you can bring them along with you. So I had gotten my ticket, I was waiting for all of them to get theirs, I was talking to the coach for a while with them, and They were checking in the last of that girls' team, and she was less than 15 years old, so she couldn't sit in the only seat that was available, the seat in the exit row. So they said, "Oh, you can't sit in this seat," and there was no other seats in the plane, so we'll just bump all of you up to business class. I was like, okay, we'll do that then. So they asked for everybody's passport back, and they gave us all business class. And I got to sit in the very front. I think they got something like they got the in-betweeny seats. I think it might have been a 747. I think I was in the nose of the plane. And then they were all just behind me in the business class. Maybe I got first class. I don't know. I wasn't in the top. I think I was in the front, in the nose area of the plane. So that was kind of interesting. I don't remember if it was business class or first class or whatever, but it was very nice. Much different than what I'm used to. But that was the biggest perk I ever got out of the silver card that I had for a little while. And that girls' school coach was extremely pleased that I had gotten them bumped up to at least the next level for them as well. So that was pretty exciting. In my head, I'm thinking, why couldn't you have just switched the freshmen and the senior seats? Like, why you had to bump us all up? I'm not that I'm complaining, but you could have moved the senior to the exit row and put the freshman in one of the other seats. Anyway, I just thought that was pretty hilarious. I can't come up with a better solution. We'll just bump you all up. Okay. I could think of 5 other solutions, but we'll go with the one you came up with. Thank you.
That sounds like a great solution to me.
So, yeah, I very much enjoyed it. I mean, it's only a 3-hour flight from Guam to Japan, so it's not even that bad, but it was quite nice.
Most of the other flights that I'm thinking of, I hated everything about it, mostly because I was in the air. And in this process of what we call flying.
The feet weren't on the ground, huh?
And not being on the ground, yeah. I will say the other most comfortable flight I've been on was another one where I ended up in business class.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually this past winter, which I might have mentioned previously.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I considered telling a story about like one of the times where I basically was hyperventilating in a seat, but probably not the greatest of stories right now.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, this story from coming back from America during Christmas time, before the world went crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I heard an announcement over the speaker saying, hey, we have extra seats in business class. For a small amount of money, we can bump you up to business class as a upgrade, which was like a third of the price that an upgrade normally costs. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to treat myself. And so I ended up deciding to go ahead and take the upgrade, and which was a very good thing for me because I was also not feeling the greatest that day. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was just an upset stomach. I don't know if it was just me feeling under the weather due to like allergies.
Do you think it was because you didn't want to fly?
Very possible. Stress does crazy things to your body. But I was just not feeling well. And so I had gotten the upgrade to business class, which meant that instead of me not feeling well and miserable in a tiny seat that is designed for a man who does not have as broad of shoulders as I do, because that comes down to the core problem with me and the economy seats, is economy seats are designed for somebody whose shoulders are nowhere near as wide as mine. Mm-hmm. I usually have to sit with my shoulders slightly up the entire trip just so I can fit my arms so I'm not like elbowing the person next to me.
Like sitting at an angle?
Yeah, exactly.
That's unfortunate.
Which is so uncomfortable. Which probably does not help how I feel about flying. Just maybe. Yeah, so that's the case that I was in. So I got onto the flight, was able to lie down, basically just was able to find some level of relaxation. If you want more of that detail, I believe it was episode...
It was 10.
10? At this rate, maybe I'll just talk about it every 10 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I talked about it in a little bit more detail in episode 10. If you want to go back and listen to that again, there we go.
There's also a good section about shower heads in that episode.
And yearly themes.
Yes. All right. So, let me start a little earlier than the flight, though, this time. This past October, I went to we belong to a large Asia association of schools, And I went to the administrators conference this time because actually Ryan and I had presented a good topic on training staff in technology and how you can use that training method to train teachers in a variety of subjects. So I presented that at the administrators conference because I thought it was a good talk, and I liked building my slide presentation with Ryan. That worked out well too.
I thought it was a great presentation as well.
So me and 2 other of our school administrators went to this conference, and one decided she wanted to get to the airport very early. It was an early flight, and she decided she wanted to get there very early. But I didn't want to wake up that early. So me and the other administrator, we were going to leave later, slightly later, still early in the day. I think still earlier than I would leave for school, but head to the train station and go. So we got on our local train to the Yamanote line. The Yamanote line is a train that circles Tokyo. So we got to the station that our train deposits us at, and we needed to take a train from that station to the express train station that goes to Narita. And this is a train trip people do all the time, right? And normally, the Yamanote line doesn't have problems. Like, do you know any time the Yamanote line has had problems, Ryan? Have you ever been?
I don't think so. Because, I mean, it's just, they run so often and so smoothly that...
Yeah, it's like never has problems, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes our line has a problem every once in a while. Minor problems. But Yamanote, never, right? We get there, and there was a Jinshinjiko, which is a suicide attempt. And probably successful suicide attempt, unfortunately.
Probably, unfortunately, yeah.
And even the Yamanote line has barriers that surround the platforms to prevent precisely these incidents. So anyway, yeah, we were at a loss. Like, what? The Yamanote line is down? Is stopped in both directions. And it's like, wow, like, what do you do? It's like, this is the only way to the express station. So we give up quickly because Jinshinjikos, they don't clear up for half an hour at least. It takes a while for them to clear up. And it had just happened. So we gave up and went straight out to the taxi stand and grabbed a taxi. And what is normally like a 15-minute train ride took us like 35 minutes to get to the express station, which is still faster than waiting for the Jinshinjiko to clear up. But I was we missed 2 consecutive express trains and got on the 3rd train than we were normally scheduled for. So we're like, and the express trains come every 15 minutes, I think.
Yeah, that's about right.
So we were about half an hour behind, pretty much, something like that. I think we might have even been a 45 minutes behind. So I was a bit nervous that we were that far behind schedule already on this trip. Like my mind was already racing, and like my colleague in the car, in the taxi with me, was talking in Japanese with the driver, and I listened for a little while, but I was so just nervous that I could not think in Japanese at that point. I'm very glad he's having a conversation with the driver. I am in no mental capacity to have a conversation in Japanese right now. My nerves are like, we got to make this plane. So yeah, anyway, that was a very shocking part of the trip already. We basically arrived at the airport just in time. We got our tickets. We went straight through immigration and straight to the gate, and they were just calling the boarding at the time we arrived at the gate. So we arrived nice and close. We meet our other colleague already there waiting for us. And we're looking at our tickets, and I think I had looked the night before at the tickets online, and it said, oh, I'm in the middle seat. That means that probably my 2 colleagues are surrounding me. So, sounds fine. This will be no problems. And I happened to notice, too, that it was in like the Economy Plus section, which I didn't pay for, and the school bought the tickets, and I'm sure they didn't pay for it. So I was like, well, whatever, Economy Plus, sure. I'm not going to complain here either. Which I think it meant, like a few inches of legroom more. I don't know. I couldn't really tell any difference in the seats, but
yeah, it's barely anything.
Besides mentioning that it's Economy Plus, there's no other benefits on the rest of the flight for that. I didn't feel anything. So I was like, okay, they'll be flanking me, no problem. So we get there, and like, no, their seats are like far back in the plane. Like, oh, okay, you guys aren't next to me? Oh, well, I'll just sit here up in the front, I guess. Well, whatever. It's not like I was going to be talking to them the whole length of the flight anyway. Pretty much, probably. So I sat down, and the guy in the aisle was the father of the family in the row just in front of us, so that made sense. Then the guy that sat on the window, he was quite an interesting character. And he has broader shoulders than you. And is probably 3 to 4 inches taller than me. So he was massive. I've not been to the Middle East much, but he had very thick clothing on it was kind of cool, I guess, but very thick clothing on and very long clothing. But yeah, he was definitely from a different culture than me. I was realizing, wow, this guy must have led a completely different life than I've led. In many ways, just a completely different life than I've led. He spoke very little English. Of course, I spoke nothing. He spoke. So it was very nice that at least spoke a very little bit of English. So we communicated a little bit there. But of course, our conference is in Kota Kinabalu, but this flight was landing in Kuala Lumpur and we were going to lay over. And we were on Malaysian Airlines, so all the stewardesses speak a little bit of English. Some of them probably spoke Japanese, but none of them speaks what he speaks. So he's flagging them down very rudely, making a bunch of clicking noises at them to get them to do stuff. Right? I'm realizing, probably women in his culture are not as valued as they are in my culture. Okay, let's let some of this slide. We get our lunches. He takes food off my tray and trades it for, he took my Snickers bar and gave me a roll. And I was like, okay, we'll be okay with this too. He definitely had a hard time sleeping and made lots of noises, and I'm sitting there watching the shows on my iPad that I want to watch. And I think I might have been even editing one of the episodes that we'd recorded. So I'm trying to do my things, but he is very distracting most of the time, asking me questions. At one point he asked me for money. No, at 2 times he asked me for money. And I was not giving him a single cent. No, you're not having any of my money. You can take food off my tray, fine, we'll live with that, but you're not having any of my money. Oh, goodness. Could not wait to land in Kuala Lumpur soon enough.
How long is that flight?
It was a 6-hour flight.
Oy.
I think I asked him, because again, I was trying to be polite a few times. I think I asked him why he was in Japan, and he was like, he was touring with his friend. Now he's working his way back. And he had enough money to buy a ticket to Kuala Lumpur, so he wanted money from me so that he could buy a ticket. And I'm like, no, I am not participating in this.
No.
You cut yourself out here, you get yourself back. I am not touching that at all.
Yeah, and a flight from Kuala Lumpur would not be a cheap.
No.
It's one thing if he was like, yeah, can you float me $5?
Right.
But that's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's going to be $1,000+ plane ticket.
Easily.
Not giving you money. I'm sure you have a plan. You stick with your plan. Don't include me in any more of your plan. Also, I had a bunch of equipment too. I had my iPad, my nice headphones, my phone. I had all my stuff, right? And I'm thinking, I am not going to the bathroom with him sitting here.
Yeah.
So one time he went to the bathroom, and as soon as he walked over me to the bathroom, I dropped my headphones, went to the other bathroom on the other side, went to the bathroom quickly, and came back before he was done too. I was like, oh my goodness. So at one point he switched with me and wanted the center seat, so I was not going to complain. And then I can, turn slightly toward the window. And it was a very weird flight. He was a very interesting guy. I've been on many flights and never sat next to somebody that was hard to sit next to. There might have been somebody who's sleeping and snored, and like that, you just get over it, right? You turn your volume up and you're done. This guy would just bug me and ask me questions, and ask me questions in broken English, and then I'd have to try to think about what he's saying. So I'd have to stop my movie or whatever it is, pour my attention into what he's trying to ask me, and it was silly questions. Yeah, he led a very different life than I did. Anyway, that was very interesting. I did not enjoy it.
I've only had one slightly uncomfortable person to sit next to, and that was because they kept talking to me constantly. Mm-hmm. Nothing other than that. They just kept talking.
I think I might have been an uncomfortable person to sit next to once or twice when we had our little kids. One flight I held one daughter almost the entire flight. I forget which one it was. I think it might have been my youngest daughter. And she would cry sometimes, but sleep most of the time. So that was, it worked out pretty well, I thought. But I'm sure her crying every once in a while probably bothered people.
Well, I feel like there's a difference between, a crying child every once in a while and, when I say this person would not stop talking to me, it was, the entire flight.
Yeah, I was trying to temper my...
Aggravation?
Disappointment, and realize, that's why I guess I kept thinking, man, this guy's lived a different life than me. Just trying to imagine, where do you come up with, he's raised in a male-dominated culture, like completely different life than I've led in almost every way. I tried to be polite most times, but I definitely answered a bunch of questions with one word or yes or no, and moved on back to my movie or whatever.
There are certain things where you realize, like, certain social cues might not be picked up if somebody is from a different culture.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I see that you're answering me in one word, I go, yeah, he's done with me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas maybe for somebody else, that might just be like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for answering my question. Now I have another question.
Well, and I think, too, he seemed to be building up his questions, right? I mean, again, he was not perfect in English. So it seemed to me that every once in a while he'd be building up his question in English and then being able to finally articulate it. So I think that was happening a few times, too. So that was kind of also, I was realizing, oh, yeah, well, I do that in Japanese all the time. Of course, you got to be careful building up your question in a different language because you'll get an answer in that other language and you have to be able to understand it. I think he understood my answers, but that's the fear I have when I build up questions in Japanese. Don't build up a question in Japanese because you have to be able to understand the answer.
Yeah, I recently, when I was canceling my internet service at my old house, trying to do that because NTT only does cancellations over the phone.
Oh, of course. They want to keep you there.
Why would they do something like a simple, easy internet
Cancel online? Mm-hmm. Yep. So anyway, it was quite an interesting flight. I definitely tried to avoid him when we landed in Kuala Lumpur.
I can't say that I necessarily blame you on that.
I found my colleagues right away and I said, okay, here you guys are. I'm going to stick with you. We're sticking together.
I'm never leaving you again.
Don't let me sit next to him.
And he was on your next flight.
No, he wasn't. He went somewhere else. Oh, goodness. I watched him go off into a different direction. I was like, okay, phew. Most of my flights are pretty smooth. In some ways, I kind of like flying.
I understand the premise behind liking flying. And at one point in my life, I think I did. But there was some point where I just, every time that we fly, I think it's partially because I'm so used to being in control. Like in a car, many times I'm the one driving. When I'm going anywhere, I'm the one walking or riding a bike. I'm the one in control of the bike. For a plane, it is the one thing where I go, no matter what I do, I have no control on this one.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, clearly it is because I am a control freak. And I think that's part of the problem. If something goes wrong, there is nothing I can do to prevent it from going wrong. Whereas in every other situation where I'm in a vehicle, there is something I can do, usually.
We had some good flights, it sounds like.
Yeah, those were pretty much my only two good flights.
So are you thirsty, Ryan?
I am definitely thirsty. I think we've talked enough to make my throat a little bit dry.
Build up a thirst.
So what is this drink that you're having me drink today?
Well, this is interesting. This has been on the shelves here in the stores for a little while now, and I finally broke down and bought it. I was a little hesitant because, well, for a few reasons. One, it's more expensive than a normal bottle of drink. Not that that's a big problem, but, well, the other reason is because it's smaller. So not only are you paying more, you're getting less.
But it's Premier.
It's Premier. Well, so it better be Premier, let me tell you. So it is only 380 milliliters of drink. So just over a can of soda in this tiny bottle here. Cans of soda are usually 350 milliliters, right?
Yeah, I think so. I'm also a little curious on what it's saying. It looks like there's this one section that tells me that I need to like turn it upside down and twist it.
I just noticed that too. I think you're supposed to. It says one time, right?
Yeah.
One time, slowly. Yukuri.
Yukuri ikai hikurikaisu.
If it's kaisu, that's what it is.
I think so. I can't tell from here. That kanji is way too small, and I'm terrible at kanji.
Oh yeah, there's sediment. Look at that.
Oh yeah.
This must be really premium because there's sediment on the bottom of the bottle.
So this is, I don't think we actually said, this is Fanta Premium Grape.
Fanta Premium Grape. Which the headlining thing right on the front is 13% fruit juice.
13 whole percents.
Mm-hmm. Coming straight from Minute Maid, nonetheless. So, Japanese drink with Minute Maid juice inside. Although, is Fanta Japanese or is Fanta part of Coca-Cola?
Fanta's part of Coca-Cola.
Uh,
Yeah, so basically it is telling me to flip it once, slowly, of course,
mm-hmm.
and then that's how we're supposed to...
Yes, I've flipped it a few times now. Mine's going to be broken. Well, I was trying to get rid of some of the sediment. Some of my stuff is stuck on the bottom. Just trying to get it mixed back into the drink without shaking it.
Ah. A little bit of mine is too.
So I hope this is good.
I hope so too.
Yeah, let's open it up, right?
Yeah. A very strong smell.
Yes, very serious grape smell. It tastes like grape soda. I guess it tastes more grape.
Tastes a little bit more sour.
Yeah, sour. It's stronger.
Yeah.
Like almost stronger than real grape would be, perhaps.
You know what it kind of reminds me of?
Hmm?
Have you ever had sparkling grape juice?
Mm.
It's basically the grape juice that looks like it's in a champagne bottle that you definitely give the kids so that they feel like they're drinking along with the adults.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It tastes like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's that strong grape flavor with just carbonation, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. And the grape flavor is a little bit more to me like Japanese grapes, the grapes that you peel.
Yeah.
In large size, right? We're talking 2 inches in diameter, those grapes, right?
Yeah, those grapes.
So it's a little bit more that flavor as opposed to American grape flavor.
I would say it would be, in my mind, basically if you took Japanese grapes to make that sparkling grape soda.
Yes, that's what it tastes like to me. It's not bad. It's just different.
It's not bad. It's different.
It's not fake, right? I guess it's
No.
not fake flavoring.
For the size, I don't think it's worth the extra money.
Yeah, I'm agreement there. I like my sugar water inexpensive, thank you.
What are you talking sugar water? This has 13% of juice.
Of fruits.
Yeah, probably the 13% is all in the sediment.
It does say puree, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I think there's puree inside.
Yeah.
They took some grapes, they juiced most of them, put some in a blender, and stuck it all in. Right?
It brings it up to 13.
Mm-hmm.
It's got real grape flavor.
Yeah, it's good. It's not. What's the one we had recently that was real? Oh, the melon soda, right?
Yeah.
It tasted like melons, but I didn't like that. It's better than that one.
Yeah, but that one tasted like melon, but was definitely a fake.
Yeah, well, yes.
Like, they didn't get any melon juice in there.
I think it might have still been 1%, but still 1%. That's nothing. It was mostly flavoring.
Yeah.
This one probably is.
It's more grape than 1%.
That's for sure.
It's at least 12% more than 1%.
At least.
At least. I can do maths?
It's not going to be my favorite.
No.
I think it's dead set middle of the line.
I would put it a little bit higher than the middle, but not much.
I think cost is bringing it down for me.
Well, that's why it's not bringing it down for me, because you're the one who supplied it this time.
Because I paid 50 yen more for this bottle than I would pay for a Coke.
Well, you know, I'll just make sure that next time that I buy something, then I make sure that it's on discount.
You're going to get me another Pepsi Japan, huh?
No.
It's going to be Pepsi Japan asparagus. I know.
If they actually made it, I would totally buy that. Just because you two realize that I will grab whatever sounds to be the most ridiculous. Yeah, I think this is definitely one that I'm finishing.
Yes.
Mostly because I've only taken a couple of drinks and it's almost already gone.
Yeah, wow. It's so small. It's not that hard to get there.
For the main media of the day, we decided that we were going to watch a episode of MASH.
Mm-hmm.
This is because where I have watched basically all of MASH, Nate, I think you have only watched a couple of clips here and there.
A couple of clips here and there, yeah, before this. Mm-hmm.
So I thought, hey, I'm going to get him to watch some MASH because I really enjoy the show. Unfortunately, I do not have season 1 on DVD, so I could not lend him season 1 because I don't have it. But I felt like another good episode to start with would be season 4, episode 1, Welcome to Korea. So I had Nate watch that episode, and we are going to talk about it here. So for those of you who have not watched MASH in a long time, we're going to provide you with a little bit of a summary. For those of you who have not watched it at all, I would suggest that you go ahead and watch this episode. It's only an hour-long episode, which I think, because there's no commercial breaks, I think that only ends up being about 40 minutes.
Yeah, it was like 50, actually. I was surprised.
50?
Yeah, they must have had shorter commercial breaks back then.
Maybe. Well, this episode of MASH focuses largely on an introduction of BJ Honeycutt, a new character who is being introduced to the MASH unit. Hawkeye Pierce returns to the 407th after a weeks-long R&R, where he realizes that his best friend and roommate, Trapper John McIntyre, has been released from the Army and is currently on his way back to the United States. Having just come back from R&R, he disobeys orders and goes with Radar O'Reilly to go and try to say goodbye to Trapper John. Frank Burns, who is now currently the commanding officer, and Margaret Houlihan both plan on how they are going to meet and greet Honeycutt when he arrives at 4077. On the way to the airfield, Hawkeye Pierce and Radar O'Reilly avoid a blockade, where they are then stopped by a future blockade using some rather silly excuses. When they arrive at the airfield, they meet BJ Honeycutt, but realize that Trapper John has left Korea and he missed his chance to say goodbye by a total of 10 minutes. After having their own Jeep stolen and not knowing how to get back, they decide to take a short break in the Officers Club, where they get a drink. After they left the Officers Club, they decide to steal a General's Jeep to get back to the 407th. On their way back to the 4077, they pass by the guard who they met earlier, and after some excuses, they get past him, after giving, of course, their current commanding officer's name, Frank Burns, and they continue driving. While they are driving, they happen upon a pair of Korean girls who are probing a wheat field with poles to check for landmines, their father watching from the edge of the farm. Hawkeye yells at the girls to stop. The man says, no, continue, to his girls, and eventually one of the mines in the field goes off. Radar runs into this field, grabbing the girl, and then the soldiers, Hawkeye, Honeycutt, and Radar, all go and take her to a hospital. After their time at the local hospital, they find themselves with a flat tire. In the middle of changing it, they also suffer a sudden guerrilla attack. So they quickly change the tire and escape. After that, they happen upon a army unit which falls under artillery fire, leaving several soldiers wounded. During this entire process, BJ and Hawkeye run around the field trying to save what soldiers they can. BJ, of course, vomiting upon seeing the extent of one of the soldiers' wounds. Once they finally arrive back at 4077, they decide to have their last stop at Rosie's Bar, just outside the camp, where Hawkeye buys BJ a drink, and proceeds to tell him all about the things that he gets to look forward to now having been assigned to 4077. When they finally get to the camp proper, BJ is clearly very drunk and decides to greet his now commanding officer, Frank Burns, with, "What say you, ferret face?" And the three basically collapse on the ground laughing. The episode does end with the appearance of the new commanding officer who will take over after Frank Burns has been relieved of duty, which is more explained in the next episode, of Colonel Sherman Potter. The episode has so much little details.
It does seem like it's in the middle a little bit.
Yeah.
I was curious, who was the commanding officer before Frank Burns?
So before Frank Burns, they mention him. This was Henry Blake. Henry Blake was mentioned a couple of times. They actually talked about making the bar when they were building the bar. Oh, wait, no, that's in the next episode. Never mind. I watched 2 episodes because I couldn't stop after one. Henry Blake was the previous commanding officer. In the final episode of Season 3, which I'm going to give you some spoilers, sorry, he is given his going home orders.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, his plane is shot down as he was going home.
Oh, you learned that in that episode too?
You learned that in that episode. It was a very beautiful episode dealing with the relationships they had built up, but also how they were dealing with life and death at that time.
So was he cherished is not the exact, was he at least respected?
He was beloved. He wasn't, respected is questionable, but beloved.
Mm-hmm. Beloved by the officers or beloved by the
men.
Mm-hmm.
For example, Frank and Margaret Houlihan, who are the two who basically were working, they are the ones who basically are very much, you need to follow things by the book, very GI. They did not like Henry Blake. Henry Blake was basically he would get the work done, but he was very lackadaisical. But when it came to surgery, he was very focused on that. It's the fact that he was a good surgeon, a good doctor, not a good army man. He was the commanding officer for the first 3 seasons. Some of the things that were very well known about him: he was a bit of a drinker, and by a bit, I mean a lot, and a bit of a womanizer. That's just a few things to say about Henry Blake, but he was a very, very beloved man, at least among the men.
And it seemed like they were moving people around between seasons, right? I'm assuming that's why Trapper, up and left.
Yeah.
It almost sounded like that was a surprise between seasons and they were just writing him out in the first episode.
I think that might have been it. If they did know, they wouldn't have wanted to lose both Trapper and Henry Blake at the same time.
Right. Yeah, they didn't want to impinge on that story.
Yeah. So the reason I had you watch this episode specifically, yes, I do realize that it was in the middle.
Yeah.
And you aren't getting quite the feel of all the characters as you should have. But because you were following along with BJ as he was being introduced to Korea, I felt like it was a good place to at least get a feel for some of the relationships and some of how the show goes.
Well, and here's one question I have for you. It seemed like this episode had a little bit of doctoring when they were on the field providing care for that unit that was under attack by artillery. I get the feeling that more of the show is like surgery in the tent in MASH 4077, right? Not necessarily on the field doctoring.
Yes. A lot of the actual surgery that happens and the doctoring that happens on the show is inside the tent at 4077.
Mm-hmm. So I think, if anything, this show missed that perhaps, but it had other elements. So I didn't feel like I missed it. I mean, it's just, I was realizing halfway through that, I probably see more doctoring in a different way in other times.
Oh, yeah. I wish I had season 1 so I could have shown you that. But I also felt like this was a great way to introduce you to some of these characters and get a feel for them. I do realize that, like, some of the things work better because I know the characters from the previous seasons. There wasn't really another great place to introduce you outside of season 1.
One of the questions I have, too, is I've known of Klinger's antics, just in pop culture, I guess, perhaps.
Yep.
But I am wondering, is he just trying to get out of the army, or is it his preference, and is it a statement of preference in the 70s?
It was his way of getting out of the army. A large part of his character, at least in the first half of the series, is him trying to get out on what is called a Section 8. Which is basically saying that he is unfit for duty because of something mentally wrong with him. That's what he's trying to do the entire time, is just basically convince everybody that he is insane. Dressing up like a woman is his normal go-to. He has done other things to basically try to convince everybody he's insane in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
He has some interesting things. So, for example, in the very next episode, again, spoilers a bit, but in the very next episode, the new commanding officer, Sherman Potter, actually orders him to put on his army uniform and wear it like normal. But then he ends up somehow developing psychosomatic symptoms where he gets a rash everywhere where the army uniform is touching. So, you can guess how that one ends. All right, I have to ask, first of all, how did you feel about the show?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I think I was expecting a little bit more comedy, but it doesn't mean that I wasn't sad to not get it in the end. I think I still got a great episode out of it. I'm not sure how much more comedy there could have been. In fact, I think one of the things that I really liked about it was the balance between comedy and seriousness, because it jumped pretty hard between comedy and serious a few times. And I thought that was played well. Like, you knew when they were being serious and you knew when they were being comedic.
I'm glad that you liked it, and yes, I think that is basically exactly where this show lands so well. Throughout the entire series, it basically has those shifts where it is serious, but they also try to find some measure of levity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is dealing with the harsh realities of war, but also trying to keep yourself sane by cracking a joke.
Right.
And that is basically the epitome of everything.
And I was mentioning to you as we were passing this week, but yeah, I was starting to watch the show, and my wife is Korean, so I was saying to her, do you want to watch this show? It's a comedy about the Korean War. She's, and you know, me not knowing enough about the show, saying it's a comedy about the Korean War. And she's looking at me saying, a comedy about the Korean War? What are you talking about? So yeah, it didn't end up being a comedy about the Korean War, but a comedy that takes place during the Korean War would have been at least a more accurate statement.
And the social setting that a lot of this takes part in is, yes, it's in the Korean War, but a lot of the backdrop had the feel of the Vietnam War too.
Mm-mm-mm.
Because the Vietnam War had a lot more of the protest of being there than the Korean War did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, a little bit about the setting too. Like, I did look it up afterward, but the 4077 I think is in, I don't exactly know how to pronounce it, but I think it's Uijeongbu.
Uijeongbu.
Which is pretty close to the border.
Yeah.
I had looked up Uijeongbu previously because I know there's an international school there.
Yeah, well, the MASH it stands for Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. Mm-hmm. And so it's designed to be able to be like picked up and moved.
Mm-mm.
I mean, that being said, that they pretty much stay in Uijeongbu for a long time, even though they're supposed to be mobile.
It's mobile getting them there and mobile getting them back out, right?
Yeah, I guess so. The show aired on CBS from 72 to 83.
That's a long run.
Yeah. I mean, it was a 11-year long series. But I mean, you think of like the type of society that was in America at that time, especially in regards to how people were viewing the Vietnam War. That's the society in which this show came about. That's why it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so, I mean, a few things that I liked. I mean, we talked about the comedy.
Yeah.
But one of the things I think I liked about it, too, was that the comedy was about sticking it to the man, most of the comedy. Or a little bit of situational stuff. Just a little, like you said, antics.
Yeah.
Well, most of the antics were with Radar, whereas most of the comedy about sticking it to the man was definitely Alan Alda's character.
Hawkeye, yeah.
Hawkeye, yes. Mm-hmm. It was only belittling the Americans.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is this show actually tended to treat the civilians and the people of Korea with a whole lot of respect, whereas the people who they always felt were the butt of the jokes were the Americans.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that you do learn from watching this show, at least on how all the characters act, Hawkeye tends to be, yes, he is very much the character who does a lot of the stick it to the man sort of stuff, but his comedy is also very much in his quick-witted humor.
Yeah, comebacks. Mm-hmm.
His comebacks, but also his just the way that he uses language. There's actually one really interesting episode that I thought about. I'm trying to remember what episode it is, but it is an episode where basically... Oh, here it is. It was actually in the same season.
Oh, okay.
It's episode 18 of this season. Basically, Hawkeye gets in an accident and sustains a concussion. And so while he is waiting for help to arrive, he is basically trying to keep himself awake. And so the entire time he is just talking. The Korean family he is with do not understand English, so they're basically staring at him the entire time. But it's basically him rambling for 20 minutes.
Mm.
And it is actually an extremely interesting story watching that. You have the witticisms, you have him pondering about life, you have the amazingness of the human thumb.
Because you have to.
Yeah, he just talks about whatever, just trying to keep himself awake, trying to keep himself, like... Conscious. It is a wonderful episode that I always remember. But, like I said, it's one of those things where those are the sort of things that you remember about this character. Is his entire character is on his use of language, his witticisms, and how he treats the world and how he views the world. So I really like him as a character.
Mm. Well, it didn't seem terribly inappropriate to me either. Like, I do think that his comedy is about sticking it to the man in general, right? Not just, well, except maybe specifically directed toward that major that's in charge. Ferret Face, I forget his name.
Ferret Face, yes, Frank Burns.
Frank Burns. Sticking it to him specifically, but also to it in general.
A little bit of background, because that works so much better, and you understand that so much better if you watch the previous seasons. Uh-huh. But Frank Burns is a major, so he is in rank above Pierce, but Pierce is the chief surgeon because he is a better surgeon. Mm-hmm. And so there is always a lot of back and forth on them, but also Frank Burns is apparently an awful surgeon. Mm-hmm. So there is that, but they had lived in the same tent, him, Trapper, and Hawkeye, for the first 3 seasons. So basically there are constant bickering at each other, constant pranks on each other, things like that happens all throughout the first 3 seasons. And so season 4, after they've been fighting for 3 years, and the original commanding officer is no longer there, Henry Blake is no longer there, now Frank Burns is in charge, and so he's basically trying to lord over everybody else, and Hawkeye's just not having it, is basically what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm. Now, the replacement commanding officer does appear in the last scene.
Yes.
So Frank Burns' tenure is pretty short, I guess, right?
Oh, yes. His tenure is this entire episode.
And he's still around in season 4, though. He doesn't disappear after this episode.
No, he does not.
I was wondering if he goes to jail for stealing the Jeep, although he didn't steal the Jeep, but still it's under his name, right?
He did not steal the Jeep, and he is still there for the entire season. He is not going away. Actually, episode 2 is largely about how Frank deals with the fact that he's now been replaced.
He's had to see this happen, though. I guess maybe he was hoping it wouldn't happen.
He was hoping it wouldn't happen.
What's the rank of the new guy coming in?
He's a colonel.
Oh, yeah, so...
The first couple of episodes of this season is also largely about, how does the MASH deal with this new colonel in charge? Mm-hmm. Because they had been very used to how Henry Blake ran things. Now they have this colonel who is also, he's regular army. He wasn't drafted. Mm-hmm. All the other people in the group, most of them are draftees. Mm-hmm. There's a few who were part of the regular army before, but a lot of them are draftees. And I think that is largely why they come across as having certain attitudes towards the American government or things like that, because they didn't want to be here. Mm-hmm. They were just told by their government they had to be here.
Well, and one of the things to that I was going to say, too, is the sticking it to the man thing didn't seem very inappropriate to me.
No.
Because I feel like I get the same feeling from some of the people I know from the bases here in Japan, even. They make comments every once in a while that sound like, sometimes you have to stick it to the man on the base to get what you want or to get things moving forward or whatever.
And maybe stick it to the man isn't quite the phrase that we need. Maybe it's stubbornness. Maybe it's pushing it.
Yeah, prodding the system, perhaps.
Prodding the system. Because sticking it to the man usually sounds like you're being petulant, and that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of you're doing what you need to do regardless of what the rule is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Anyway, I enjoyed that part of it. I thought one of the other big things that I liked was the apparent care for life. I mean, part of the switch between we're doing comedy now and we're doing seriousness now. But, I mean, the bit with the Korean family on the field searching for mines, I thought that was pretty good. And like, look, okay, we're turning around, we're driving her to the nearest hospital. And then sadness about the condition of that hospital immediately following that. It is too bad, of course, but it would have been interesting to see them push to bring her to their own hospital, but they probably can't do that.
They would not have been able to do that, especially not with Ferret Face in charge.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming that's against the rules. Again, so many rules that I have to deal with the American bases here in Japan. So many rules. Oh, my goodness. But yeah, Care for Life was a good thing to see.
Oh, and that's part of the thing is all these characters are doctors, nurses, and the people who support them.
Mm-hmm.
For example, Hawkeye holds his Hippocratic oath to the highest esteem, to the point where there are certain episodes where you're kind of a little afraid that he's going to go insane, and others where you think he has.
Mm-hmm.
Just because he is doing his best to save everyone. He is trying so hard to keep them all alive.
Yeah, he seems like the kind of guy that will take it personally if someone dies on his watch. Like he's taken it personally that somebody died while on the operating table, I'm guessing, right?
There's one episode where he basically has a breakdown because he keeps seeing the same kids coming in that he's seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And they're kids.
Mm-hmm.
So he's basically dealing with the fact that what is it that keeps this war going? Why do we keep doing this? Why are we sending these children to fight?
And then the other thing I liked too is, I mean, the characters were pretty well defined here even. I think the only skepticism I really had about the characters was I felt that Honeycutt seemed to fit too nicely into being Hawkeye's friend too quickly, especially being... I mean, I'm assuming he was there to replace one of Hawkeye's other friends.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty clear that Hawkeye was devastated over the loss of a friend.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, he's got a brand new best friend. I mean, that being said, he could have gotten another Frank Burns, right? I guess that's what I was thinking.
Oh, yeah.
The show really wanted Hawkeye to have another friend. But not that Honeycutt wasn't a well-defined character. It's that it seemed a little bit convenient to me that he was exactly what Hawkeye needed right away.
Well, the one thing I will say is largely this episode is kind of Honeycutt figuring out what in the world is going on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, being fresh off the boat fresh off the plane, I guess.
Yeah. Both Trapper and Honeycutt are very different types of friends.
Okay. We learn that later, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Trapper was a character. Basically, he was very much a similar to Hawkeye kind of character, but very focused on mischief. He was a class clown.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Honeycutt later tends to be, he feels a little bit more aloof. He will initiate some practical jokes, but he's sneakier.
Mm-hmm.
He's sneakier about his practical jokes, whereas Trapper was more upfront.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think the big difference, for me at least, is the fact that Trapper always felt like more upfront, but also more of a class clown, whereas Honeycutt feels a little bit sneakier about his pranks, but also...
He seems more intelligent.
He's more of an intelligent kind of person.
Mm.
Yeah, I would say intelligent is a good way to put it. Thoughtful, and... You later find this out about him, but he is very much seen as a faithful family man. Like, he's very focused on his family.
Mm.
Sends letters to his wife constantly. That sort of stuff.
Mm.
And I believe BJ stays on the show until the end. Because it runs for 11 years, they have a large amount of cast who come and go. There are only a few characters who are there, like, from the beginning. and who make it all the way to the end.
The other characters, I think, were pretty well defined too. I mean, Radar was always fun. He had lots of good moments, especially defining his quirkiness, but still straightforwardness and honesty.
Radar is a great character. Honestly, so many of these characters are fantastic. This entire show is built on some amazing characters, but also just this well-written plot that balances the seriousness of life and the seriousness of what was going on with trying to keep yourself sane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it did a good job. I think it was enjoyable.
I still think that you need to see more than just this episode, especially if I can get a hold of season 1.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. I think we can come back to this another time. I'm very glad that we also got the Premier Grape drink.
Yes, because Radar O'Reilly does always drink his grape knee-highs.
I didn't even realize that until you had said it the other day. It's like, oh, it's good we got the Premier Grape. I was like, oh yeah, he kept drinking grape knee-high.
Yeah, he continuously drinks grape knee-high throughout a large part of the show.
So I thought that was quite fun. That's very coincidental.
Yes. All right, just to give you an idea for how things like fade in and fade out of characters, Hawkeye is there from the beginning to the end. Margaret Houlihan is also there from the beginning to the end. Klinger is technically there from the beginning to the end, except the first 3 seasons he was just a recurring character. He wasn't in every episode. And the same can be said of Father Mulcahy, who was played by William Christopher. Trapper and Henry Blake were the 2 who only made the first 3 seasons. Frank Burns, I think he's there through the 5th season. Radar O'Reilly is there through the 8th season. Honeycutt is there from the 4th to the end. Sherman Potter is also there from the 4th all the way to the end. And then there is another character who isn't introduced until season 6, who lasts until the end after that.
Yeah, David Ogden Stiers. He's the clock on Beauty and the Beast.
Yes. If you notice where he starts and where another character ends, you'll notice that there's probably a gap that he fills.
It's too bad that Radar leaves.
Yeah, he does, but they make good mention to him after he heads out, and it's well done.
Okay.
This is a great show that treats the show very well. I hope that even if we don't get a chance to do this again on this show, in the podcast, I hope that there's a chance that you get to watch more of this.
Sounds good.
Because I really like the show, and I have had a habit. I also will binge the show every once in a while, where I'll just go through an entire season in 2 weeks.
Well, they're quick episodes, right?
They're normally 20-minute long episodes. So not very long, nice, quick, and usually they get everything wrapped up really quickly. Some of the plot lines are amazing. I will say one of the ones that always makes me laugh is there is one episode where the majority of the plot is how Hawkeye is trying to get ribs from a very specific store sent to the 4077 from America. Because he really is getting sick of the army food, and so he orders ribs, barbecue ribs, to be sent over to Korea. And the entire plot is what kind of shenanigans he has to pull to get these ribs there. Also, those ribs sounded really good.
They played it really well, huh?
They sound really delicious.
What's with the stars in MASH?
It is because it's an acronym. You could put dots, but it's America. America uses stars. We don't use no dots. Sorry.
Oh yeah, so my kids finished up all my high chews pretty quickly.
I finished up all my high chews pretty quickly.
Oh, you did? Oh, so it didn't even take you that long, huh?
No, it took me about a week.
Oh, it's about a week. Okay.
But, that's because I had cleared out, one entire one the very next day and went, I can't keep doing this. I have to wait.
So then you spaced the rest out.
So I spaced the rest out.
Good. And my kids even finished up my Calpis. I didn't actually get to finish it. I was having so much fun. Left it in the fridge for the next day, and my kids found it and finished it up. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I didn't get to finish it. That's too bad. But they enjoyed it. That's good.
Yeah, at least somebody got to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
This is the problem of always doing the soda right before we do this. I'm trying not to burp straight into the mic.
I can edit it out. It's fine. Plus, it makes a good blooper.
Yeah, that makes a great blooper when you hear me go bleh.
Kuala Lumpur is an interesting airport. It's got many spokes.
I still say that like my least favorite airport was always Dallas.
I haven't been there at Dallas. No, I must have been to Dallas one. I forget now. But I don't remember. I don't remember the airport I landed in Texas, but I know I landed in an airport in Texas.
Yeah, it was just a bad experience. It probably isn't that bad of an airport, but I've only been there once, and it was a bad experience. But again, I'm also like based out of Chicago, so you know everybody complains about my airport.
I don't think I've been to O'Hare.
It's got its problems. A number of them, a large number of them.
It's a good thunderstorm, huh?
Yeah, I had just finished doing a whole bunch of cleaning around the house, and so I had left the windows open.
Oh.
I didn't get too much water inside. No, it was like there was some moisture by one of the windows, but other than that, everything else stayed dry.